So they say you can never go home, which I think is a weird saying because honestly, I go back home all the time. My parents still live in the house that I grew up in. In fact, my room is still the same way it was when I left. I think ultimately my mom is waiting for me to move back in, which, if I'm being honest, that says far more about her than it does about, anything else. And trust me, there's times when I really think about taking her up on that. You know what, I've got science projects to help with, and dance classes to go to, and everyone wants to eat, and everything's dirty, and it's all up on me, and I'm like, Mom, your baby boy is coming home. No, no, no. But the reason I bring this up is because for me, home in that sense, that nostalgia sense, was Suikoden 2. And I've been able to play Suikoden 1 and 2. I had this pre-ordered for my Switch for an incredibly long time, ever since they really announced it. Because it's been years, literally years, since I know that they were going to make a remake, and I've just been waiting for it. Because Suikoden 2 for me is childhood. I remember staying up way too late and putting blankets over the TV and myself on my crappy PlayStation 1. So I'm sitting there playing Suikoden 2, being at school and like drawing the characters, and really just going deep with the story and thinking about the entire game. Is one of those games that really hit home because it was something I thought about outside of the game. And this was one of the first games I've had that experience with. Like I said, I would spend a lot of my time in class doing fan art and stuff like that. It was just one of those experiences that really brought me into gaming and RPGs in general. And after I beat 2, I ended up finding Suikoden 1, flying through that, and those games have always been those cornerstones of RPGs for me. So of course I was excited when the game got re-released, and even though like so many people would argue that it's only a nostalgia, and the nostalgia never hits the same because you can't go back. It's not the same. I disagree. And let's get into why I disagree as we talk about Suikoden 1 and 2, remastered on the Nintendo Switch, my thoughts on it, without going too far in. But before we do that, please hit that like and subscribe button, or I'm gonna have to start a Third Eye Blind cover band and tour the American Southwest. Anyway, let's get into Suikoden 1 and 2. So again, I'm not going to go too deep into the stories because honestly I don't want to ruin them, and they both sort of follow the same storyline, if you will. Like, not storyline, but ultimately in both games, you end up being tasked with raising a resistance army to the evil empire, if you will, and your whole job is to collect as many soldiers as you can and recruit them to your team. There are 100 characters available, although they're not required. Many of them that are required you will get with the story, and both stories are distinctly different but also sort of similar in the fact that they both run parallel to the whole idea of a resistance army, and ultimately both of them have to do with your friends and family and saving them and standing up for them, at the same time interacting with these new characters that you meet. Some very, very crazy epic battles happen, some really memorable environments that you explore. There's just a lot to it, and honestly I don't want to get into any of them because it's really difficult for me to talk about it without spoilers. The one thing about both of the games is some very important things happen relatively early that kind of start the game off, but it would be a real big spoiler, so I don't want to ruin any of that. But I will say, for its time, it wasn't just recruiting 100 individual characters to your army that made it different. It was also like formations. So in a lot of RPGs, the turn-based RPGs, you would typically have like 3 to 4 members in your party, but in Suikoden, you can have like up to 6 people, I believe. There's 3 up front and 3 at the back. Ultimately, it makes sense because of just how many extra characters there are, but they can also use a lot of synergy between them. Some of the characters naturally have skills that play off each other, or that they can work in tandem, or there's specific runes that you can get and that they can create this kind of synergy. And most of the magic in this game comes from ruins, and they range from a bunch of different things that are incredibly cool to just kind of pointless. Like, I don't know if it's pointless, but like the really, really weak support type skills, Although as the main character, you are kind of saddled with a specific ruin early on, and it's incredibly powerful. It is part of the story in both of the games to an extent, but there's a lot of customization with the ruins and even upgrading them, as well as, of course, like any RPG, you have different armor and equipment that you can also upgrade. And the blacksmith plays a huge part in the game. In fact, one of the best characters to recruit as early on as possible, as soon as you can find them, is the blacksmith, because they really, really help. The other thing about the game that I think is incredibly cool is you don't just build up this party or this army. You actually usually take over a castle, and as you grow your team, the castle grows and adds more rooms and more features to it, whether it be like a hot tub or an elevator, a merchant shop, blacksmith area, all of that kind of stuff just becomes features to your castle or your area, your base, if you will. And that is really cool aspect of the game, honestly, because there again, games weren't really like that back then when this came out. These are both very long games, both of them, easily in that like 60 to 80 hour mark, maybe even more, honestly. It depends on how many of the characters you want to get. If you want to actually get all 100, you're going to be there for a minute. And my experience on the Nintendo Switch was fantastic. No crashes, no lags, no problems like that. It really took me back to playing it when I was a child. And like they say, you can't go back, but again, I think you can, because when you think about those memories of playing games like that nostalgia hit, you weren't excited about it because it completely transformed your world. No, it's because it gave you a few hours of time away from the world, away from bullies, away from your parents fighting, away from whatever might be your issue, and it gave you this world that you could just get lost in, and you didn't have to think about the real world. Ultimately, it's the same thing. It does the same thing, and you can go back to that world now. Whether it be science projects, a dance class, work, taxes, crazy government doing weird stuff, that thing on your lip that looks like herpes, but you know it's not herpes. Like, where would you have gotten herpes? You haven't been around anyone with herpes or kissing anyone weird, like, but it really looks like herpes. You think that's herpes? No, it can't be herpes. Whatever you got going on in your life, you can turn on a game like this and go back to those moments of just peace and getting lost into this amazing world. It's still there waiting for you. So when they say you can't go back, I disagree completely. But I will say this, I believe the game is technically a remaster, but honestly it doesn't feel like it. Like, it doesn't look like it. I'm sure that they've tweaked up the graphics a little bit here or there to make it more HDified and whatever. But if I'm being honest, it really doesn't seem that way. Now again, I'm playing it on the Nintendo Switch. Maybe it looks different on Steam or PlayStation 5 or Xbox or what have you. But on the Switch, in my experience, it sort of just looks like it did on the PS1. And maybe it would be a different experience if I did like a complete side-by-side, which I haven't. And honestly, my memories of it are probably a little bit more rose-colored than what they actually are. Like, in my mind, it seemed like it was detailed and looked really good, but I'm sure if I actually did check out footage from the PlayStation 1 and then compared it to the Switch, I'd be like, oh my god, this looks like night and day. But I'm just saying, from my experience of not doing that, it didn't look like a new game or a different experience or anything. That's really all I'm trying to say. Ultimately though, let me know what your thoughts are. Have you checked this out? Has this been a series that you have played before or haven't played before? Maybe you're not even familiar with Suikoden. It was kind of a cult classic style game, but anything down below is much appreciated. I love each and every one of you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.